Many serial murderers refuse to confess to their crimes after they've been arrested, charged, and even convicted. They believe their refusal to cooperate will in some way help to exonerate them. Suffolk strangler Steve Wright, for example, was the classic no-comment interviewee, and Dr. Harold Shipman turned his chair to face the wall when shown a photograph of one of his elderly victims. I call this type of killer the silent and uncommunicative. The serial killer whose confession we feature today originally behaved in this same way, claiming he was not guilty and offering no further information. He was a former soldier and then an unemployed drifter who tortured, robbed and murdered 5 victims in Battersea, London. He was named the gay slayer by the press because of the sexual orientation of all of his victims. At the height of his killing spree, he killed 4 men in 15 days, and even the pet cat of one of his victims. But after a month of silence, he confessed to the police, recounting his crimes in great detail. He claimed he killed to become a serial killer, as if this was an aspiration in itself. But did his real motivation for the murders actually mask a secret that he was unable to come to terms with? Who is he? Colin Ireland. In August 1993, Colin Ireland asked to speak to police detectives. He'd been held in custody for over a month, charged with the murder of 5 men. Up until this point, he had denied any involvement in the deaths. But all of that was about to change.
I wasn't forced to do this. In fact, when I was last interviewed by the police for 5 days, I said nothing on tape. I then spent a month in prison considering my mental state, my outlook on what had happened, and I probably didn't come to a final decision until maybe yesterday. I wanted to create a situation where I couldn't really back out of my decision, so I deliberately spoke to the prison officers regarding this. I said I was intending to change my plea to a plea of guilty. I think I should be placed in a position where I can no longer inflict harm upon others.
Ireland's previous stubborn denials were about to give way to one of the most cold and clinical descriptions of serial murder ever recorded by the British police.
While he was asleep, I put a noose around his neck. He barely came to, it was quite quick. I throttled him with the noose and he hardly struggled.
Colin Ireland was born in March 1954. It was a tragic childhood. An unmarried 17-year-old mother, a father who disappeared very quickly after.
Ireland's fractured family life would lead to frequent run-ins with the law and lead to him being in some potentially compromising situations.
He was an attractive boy and was propositioned, in his words, by a number of men as a teenager. Now, Ireland never said whether he accepted any of those proposals or whether he had a series of homosexual relationships as a teenager. Personally, I've always suspected that he did. I think he probably experimented with being gay and may have rejected it, or may have thought, no, that's not for me, and at the same time felt himself conflicted.
A series of unfulfilling relationships with women would characterize his adult life, as would his inability to settle down. he became something of a drifter, moving between low-paid jobs along the south coast. Eventually, he would settle in Southend-on-Sea.
On the surface, here is Ireland, unmarried again, starting afresh, a new home, a new job or jobs, a new beginning. But it wasn't a fresh start. What's emerging from Ireland is a darkness that was probably been there, at least in a nascent form, for most of his adult life. And steadily, over the first part of 1992, this desire to explore his sexuality and his desire to perhaps take revenge on the men who may have abused him or propositioned him when he was an adolescent. He decides, after reading a book by an FBI profiler, that he wishes to become a serial killer. It is as premeditated, as calculated as that.
Having decided he was a nobody, he then wanted to be somebody, and one of the best ways to be famous is to be a killer. We all know about Ian Brady, we all know about Peter Sutcliffe, Robert Black. He wanted to be up in that league.
He decided one new year to make a resolution. I am going to be a serial killer. That's my new career, and set about it.
But is it really possible to read a book and determine to become a serial killer? Or does Ireland's police confession really hold the key to why he commits the crimes? I'm here with Professor Michael Brooks, a forensic psychologist, to try and find out.
I should be placed in a position where I can no longer inflict harm upon others.
Do you buy this idea that the reason that he goes on this journey to become, as it were, a serial killer is because he reads a lot of books about serial killers and he wants to see if he can do it?
The second element may be true. Just because you read books about serial killers doesn't necessarily mean that you have an interest in becoming a serial killer yourself. But if that is your motive, then actually reading books can give you an awareness of ways in which serial killers have acted in the past. But there has to be other motives as well. So why did he want to become a killer? Why target homosexuals?
I think his targeting of gay men was Colin Ireland picking up on the particular vulnerability that gay men had at that point in time, which was that they felt that they needed to relate to others in a very particular way. They needed in some ways to relate slightly covertly when they were meeting new people. And in his intelligence and his ability to exploit other people, Colin Ireland recognised that very particular vulnerability of the gay community at this point in time, and he absolutely exploited it.
He could actually pick up men, imply they were going to get into an S&M situation, and would take them back to their flat or house or whatever.
As Ireland's police interview progressed, he began to justify his behaviour, a common ploy among serial killers. But was this just a mask to disguise his own feelings of self-loathing that he experienced about his conflicted sexuality?
I think it's something that's been triggering me some time before. I felt if I was approached, I felt there was a likelihood that I would kill. I thought to myself, if I'm approached, something will happen. I'm not. It would have been quite likely I would have gone on my way and maybe nothing would have happened.
For me, there's a lot of victim blaming. Ireland seems to suggest he'd let the people live. If they didn't approach him, he would only target those who approached him. To what extent is that nonsense, Michael? He would always set out to kill.
He may have set out to kill, but who was he going to target? And what he does is he reduces the chance of choosing an inappropriate victim or somebody who wasn't going to respond by not selecting those who didn't approach him. So he selected those who approached him because he became aware that these are the individuals who wanted to have a sadomasochistic relationship with him. So they were selecting themselves by approaching him in terms of his frame of reference.
I can never get to the sense with Colin Ireland, is he himself gay? Is his sexuality fluid? To what extent does sexuality play a part in all of this?
Well, certainly he's had relationships with both genders. So to say that his sexuality is fluid would be accurate. Individuals engage in sexual acts, and if they're gaining some form of sexual pleasure from those acts, then sexuality is one of the primary drivers.
Let's do COD psychology for a minute, Michael. Is he killing himself by targeting gay men?
That's just conjecture, and we don't know. Other reasons for conjecture may be actually sort of the element of disgust around that behaviour, which may be feeding from society's views around gay activities and a certain amount of homophobia. So why is he targeting homosexual men as opposed to heterosexual women or gay women when he's in fluid sexual relationships?
It's fairly complex as to whether Colin Ireland perhaps may have been gay himself, which he protests he isn't, and this was some kind of smokescreen whereby he was being vehement. This was his way of engaging gay men and then clearing his conscience that no, he was a heterosexual. I killed that person.
Colin Ireland murdered 5 gay men in London in the summer of 1993. Now, for the first time, lip-sync technology can bring Ireland's police interview to life.
I think it's something that's been triggering me some time before. I felt if I was approached, I felt there was a likelihood that I would kill.
Ireland's claims to the police during the interview that he was homophobic and afraid of gay men didn't ring true. Equally, his claim that he targeted gay men to deliberately become a serial killer feels contrived. The police investigation had revealed that he was known to frequent gay bars long before the murders began. And as the police interviews continued, it was clear from the manner with which Ireland would describe how he killed his first victim that the fantasies of sadomasochistic sex provided the context for the murders. All serial killers need a hunting ground and a victim group. Colin Ireland would find both in southwest London.
He has to find a location which is bound to have a lot of gay men in it. He hears about a pub in Earl's Court, southwest London, called the Coleherne Arms.
The Coleherne pub is a very well-known gay pub in Fulham where gay men would meet basically to have a drink and to pick up. There was quite clear codes in terms of what people wore, where they used handkerchiefs, which pocket, back pocket they used, would give information to other men for their sexual preference, thus avoiding guys picking up on the wrong kind of guy and things like this.
Ireland travels up from Southend-on-Sea, complete with a murder kit in his rucksack, including a duct tape, knife, rope. Ireland, by now, sort of tall, burly, bull-necked, cropped hair, presents, in that contemporary word, at the Coleherne as someone interested in sadomasochist sex. He's effectively pimping himself as available to gay men, particularly gay men who want to be dominated.
As detectives quizzed Ireland about his MO, he openly set the scene for how he would carry out all of the murders.
He was just in there early evening, 5, 6 o'clock. And we got talking. I realised he was that type.
On the night in question, Ireland entered the Coleherne and cruised the venue in search of his first victim. Ireland soon identified Peter Walker, a successful choreographer. After a brief exchange, the two men left together. They headed back a few miles to Walker's flat. The initial consensual liaison between the two men rapidly escalated into violence.
Ireland assaults Walker brutally, whips him with a dog lead, all manner of attack, which to some extent, it seems clear, Walker wanted. Walker didn't, however, perhaps anticipate that Ireland would go a little further.
While he was tied up, I went and got a plastic bag from the kitchen, carrier bag, and I stuck it over his head. And I think in a way he wanted to die. I think in a way he probably didn't even realise it, but I detected in him this lack of desire to carry on. And I think he knew he was going to die, and he was quite controlled about it. It was almost like a thing that was going to happen. It was almost like a fate thing.
It was our most horrific killing. But it got worse. Ireland burnt Walker's pubic hair because he said at the time to see what it smelt like. It was to become part of his signature in attacking gay men. He also scrupulously cleaned the flat of any forensic evidence that he'd been there and stayed in the flat in Battersea with Walker dead, tied to the bed, all night, watching television and eating from his refrigerator. He didn't leave until the rush hour the following morning because he thought it would be less conspicuous than him walking the streets in the middle of the night. He was a calculated killer, and this was the first of 5. The day after he walks away from Peter Walker's flat in Battersea, he phones the Sun and confesses, "I've murdered a man." But he's very worried, he says, about the dogs because they're trapped in the lounge of the flat, and that's not fair. It is one of the more bizarre elements of Ireland, but what it reflects most accurately is his intense desire for recognition. This is a man who set out to become a serial killer. According to the FBI, he has to kill 5 people to be known as a serial killer. He's going to kill 5 people. And over the next few months, he does that. In May of the same year, 1993, a couple of months after the killing of Peter Walker, he goes back to the Coleherne pub and this time collects a librarian called Christopher Dunn, who's 37. But by now, Ireland is just amending his technique slightly. He is very keen to make some money because at the moment he hasn't got a job, and so he decides that he's going to torture Dunn for the PIN number to his debit card. And he does so by effectively setting fire to his genitals.
But despite sadistically torturing his victim, Ireland was still unsatisfied, believing Dunn was lying to him.
After his PIN number, and it was one that struck me to be totally ridiculous. You know, it was three digits in a row of the same. And I thought, well, that's not really a PIN number someone would choose personally. So I got a lighter and I stuck the flame to his testicles.
With Dunn by now dead on the bed, Ireland spent all night with the corpse.
Some killers stay with the body, some killers come back to interfere with the body, like we know with several have done that. But in this case, I think he sat there, enjoyed what he did, probably relived it, but careful not to masturbate or to leave any evidence of his sexuality there. He would sit there calmly, listening to the radio and enjoy what he'd done and then think about his way home. He clearly took pleasure in his work.
Yet despite having killed a man, Ireland was about to seek sympathy from detectives, and in doing so displaying an extraordinary level of narcissism, even for a psychopath.
I think that affected me mentally to quite a degree, sitting in with these bodies for sort of like 5 or 6 hours on some occasions, watching them gradually sort of get blotchy as they do and calm. It wasn't something that I don't think I could cope with, to be honest, and deal with it too well.
Dubbed the gay slayer by the press, Colin Ireland strangled 5 men to death. With access to his actual police interviews, lip-sync technology can now bring us up close and personal with one of the most sadistic killers ever to walk the streets in the United Kingdom.
I got a lighter and I stuck the flame to his testicles.
Despite many of the victims frequenting the same pub and dying in virtually identical circumstances, Ireland remained at large and free to kill. Might this have had something to do with homophobia? The police investigation seemed hampered by a lack of knowledge about the gay scene in London and the special subculture of sadomasochistic bondage. This widespread ignorance enabled him to go undetected. However, as is so often the case, CCTV footage would lead to a turning point in the investigation, as would the discovery of the identity of one of his final victims.
By now, Ireland has very much got the taste for killing. Only a few days later, after the death of Dunn, he returns to the Coleherne pub, this time collecting an American, Perry Bradley III.
He was a businessman, he had a flat nearby in Kensington, and we went back to the flat.
Bradley was none too keen to be tied up, which is what Ireland suggested. However, he was keen on the gay relationship, and so was finally persuaded, after Ireland had told him that he could not get aroused unless there were elements of bondage, that he was impossible, he couldn't get an erection. It may or may not have been true, but it certainly served to persuade Bradley to allow himself to be bound.
I said to him, it's going to be a long night. I suggest you get some sleep if you can. And I just sat and listened to the radio, and we actually went to sleep. And while he was asleep, I put a noose around his neck. He barely came to. He barely came to, it was quite quick. I throttled him with the noose, and he hardly struggled. And Some, for instance, Walker, it took longer.
Once again, he cleans the flat. Once again, he stays the night and walks out the following morning. The police discover Bradley's body relatively quickly.
He was the son of an American senator, and he was not known to be gay. He was a closet gay, using a pub to pick up, but playing the role of a straight guy in business. He wasn't suspected at all of being involved in the gay murders. In fact, the police originally thought it was to do with the mafia and he'd been killed for some financial reason.
By now, Ireland is well and truly escalating, as the profilers call it. His blood is rushing through his veins. He is clearly desperate to kill again. Must have got some kind of fierce sexual kick out of both the killing itself and the possession of the body, being with the body. I have the power. I am in control of you to such an extent that I've extinguished your life.
I throttled him with the noose and he only struggled.
Despite our very different backgrounds and training in working with these men, the elements of sadism were quite clear, were they not?
Yeah, and two specific elements came out in sort of the interview. The one about the lighter and burning the testicles when Christopher Dunn didn't give what Colin Ireland thought was the correct PIN number. That's purely sadistic.
I got a lighter and I stuck the flame to his testicles.
But also watching someone with a noose round their neck for 5 to 6 hours, although he says it was disturbing afterwards and didn't cope too well. Well, he did nothing to stop it. So there's obviously an element within there that he was content to watch somebody take that long to die slowly and painfully.
I said to him, it's going to be a long night. I suggest you get some sleep if you can.
Now, in my world of criminology, I call that being process-focused. He's not act-focused. He doesn't want to kill these men quickly. He wants to enjoy the suffering that they are experiencing, because that makes them feel powerful.
By now, Ireland's taste for murder was insatiable, and within days, he was back at the Coleherne Arms to select another victim. This time he chose 33-year-old Andrew Collier. Once again, they went back to the young man's home.
Once again, the familiar routine. Collier allows himself to be tied up and gagged. Ireland strangles him with a noose. He searches Collier's flat while he's there and discovers that Collier is HIV positive. Ireland is furious. It indicates to me that they actually didn't have sex. I suspect Ireland did not have sex. What he wanted to do was to dominate him, and that the sexual excitement came from the domination and then the death. So I don't think there was penetration. So Ireland didn't feel that he'd been infected, but he was furious that he might have been infected had they had sex. So he decides to take a bizarre revenge on Collier. He kills Collier's cat, Millie, by hanging it. He then, over Collier's dead body, he puts naked body, he lays the cat dead, he puts Collier's penis, covered with a condom, into the cat's mouth, and he puts the cat's tail, again covered by a condom, into Collier's mouth.
The reason he did this was because he was irritated by the media picking up the story about the first killing. In the first killing, there was a dog. He contacted the police and said, could they go and let the dog out? So he had been described in the media as dog-loving or animal-loving killer. Suddenly there was an incredible media attention. Once there was recognition that there was a gay serial killer operating in London, he would read all the papers that was written about him. He would have been up to date with everything, and quite clearly the cat incident was to show that he wasn't the animal lover. He didn't want anything taken away from him. He wants it to be about him, not about animals.
Ireland said afterwards of the killing of Collier, I wanted him to have no dignity in death. And it was part anger on my part and part the thrill of killing.
Collier, I think Collier was the only one I was angry with, funny way. It was the only one I got cross with, and that's you probably noticed that in the way the body was found. I felt real angry towards him.
Now, Ireland has killed 4 times in the space of literally a matter of months. 3 within the space of a week or so. The day he leaves Collier's flat in Dalston, he phones Kensington Police.
Why are you doing this?
He told the officer in Kensington that if you don't stop me, it'll be 1 a week. I suspect at that point, Collier had tipped the final scale in Ireland's mind. He was the 4th victim. Ireland was convinced that if he killed 5, 1 more victim, he would be acknowledged as a serial killer. And he was probably, by now, anxious to be stopped. One of the strange conflicts in Ireland is that there was a part of him that actually probably wanted to be stopped, but a part of him that couldn't stop.
Why in particular homosexuals?
And so on the 12th of June, just a few days later, once again, Ireland returns to the Coleherne pub, once again equipped with what he needs to kill. Once again, looking for someone who is prepared to be dominated in a sadomasochistic sex game.
His 5th victim was the Maltese chef who dressed in leathers and was a typical kind of S&M stereotype image of a gay man. They went back to his place, but in the process they went on the tube and their picture was automatically picked up on CCTV.
This time, however, when Ireland asks for the PIN number to take another £200 from the cash machine with his debit card, the Maltese says, no, do what you want to me. If you have to, just kill me. I think Ireland was genuinely taken aback. He later described the Maltese chef as incredibly brave.
When he killed him, he set fire, or tried to set fire, to the flat to again change his MO, but also to get rid of any evidence that he may have left.
I hold all the papers, managed together in the centre of the room, for no particular reason, but that reached the point where I couldn't stop myself.
Serial killer Colin Ireland confessed to killing 5 gay men. Lip-sync technology now allows us to sit opposite Ireland in the police interview room as he confesses.
He really come to us quite quick. I told him with the noose He hardly struggled.
I believe the confessions of Colin Ireland clearly demonstrate a man at war with his own sexuality. A personal war that found expression in a series of murders within London's gay community, culminating with the tragic loss of 5 lives. His confessions show no remorse for what he had done, but they offer a fascinating resource for police officers and criminologists because they clearly demonstrate how Ireland tried to justify and obfuscate his wicked behaviour. These techniques of neutralisation are frequently employed by serial killers when speaking to the police about their heinous crimes.
Colin Ireland's killing spree was rapidly escalating to 1 victim a week. Yet despite the growing body count, the police were not going public with their knowledge.
The police were denied for a long time there was a gay serial killer, and from one point of view you can understand that. They didn't want to have a gay serial killer because that would then provoke more panic in the community. They wanted to try and deal with the matter quietly. It backfired on them. The gay community took a lot of irritation out on the police because they weren't trusting the police. Once the police started investigating the disappearance and the murder of gay men, they were going into pubs, asking gay men about their sexual behaviour. It took the police some time to realise, A, they needed to use gay police officers, and B, they had to actually start saying, we're not interested in your behaviour, we're interested in the killer's behaviour.
Now we have 5 gay men dead, and people begin to join the dots. In particular, they find some CCTV footage of Spiteri and a bulky man with a close-cropped haircut walking across the concourse of Charing Cross Station to get a train to Catford. The senior investigating officer realises that this is probably the killer, and so goes public with the CCTV.
Colin Ireland realised that it was him. He went along with his solicitor and said, yes, that's a picture of me. I was with him, we engaged in sex, and then I left and that was it.
The police interview, as a result of this, Ireland for the first time. When they do so, Ireland, who by this time is nothing if not arrogant, after all, he's killed 5 men and got away with it, makes a fool of himself. He tells the police about Andrew Collier's cat. Now that information has never been made public, and convinces the police that this is indeed the gay slayer, as the tabloids have named him, and they are going to connect him to the killings. One of the mistakes, and he made very few mistakes, that Ireland made was when he was with Andrew Collier, there had been a police siren outside, and they'd both gone to the window to look out and see what was happening. And Ireland had left his fingerprints on the window frame, and that was a part that he'd forgotten to clean. So they now have his knowledge of Collier's cat, they have fingerprints from Collier's flat, they have Ireland.
Colin Ireland's summer of terrorising the gay community in London ended upon his arrest. But his police confession makes it clear that he was still determined to intimidate and exert control over anyone who came before him, including the hardened detectives who interviewed him.
Colin Ireland is remarkably arrogant, even by serial killer standards. He really feels that he can control and be in charge of everything and every aspect. I think we see that in the way that he carried out his crimes. They were entirely him in control, entirely him doing what he wanted to do, when he wanted to do it, with whomever he picked on.
Throughout his police interviews, Ireland projected the same dominance that he had projected on his victims. He was going to tell them what it was and what he'd done, and they were going to listen. He was in control. He was in command. And if you look at his confessions carefully, he is swaggering in them. There is no hint of remorse. He is saying, look what I achieved, look what I've done, look how I am.
I think I should be placed in a position where I can no longer inflict harm upon others.
Even at this stage, faced with the evidence of what he's done, he is still prioritising his own emotions, his own emotional experience in the confessions. There's no awareness whatsoever of the evil that he has conducted. So we get him talking about feeling real anger. I felt real anger, being affected mentally, him being affected mentally by what he was doing, by having to stay in the same room as one of the bodies as the person started to blotch up and start to decompose. So we get him focusing on his own emotions, which in this situation, when he's confessing for what he's done to other people, is remarkable.
It is almost impossible to underestimate the level of Ireland's conceit, nor the level of his disconnection from his conscience. At one point in his police interviews, for example, he insists that 60% of the time he's a perfectly reasonable human being. It is an extraordinary statement. It defies belief.
I'm probably 60-70% quite a reasonable human being most of the time, but there is that side of my character that is negative. It's quite cold and calculating.
There can be nothing reasonable about a man who ties up, binds and gags his victims and strangles them with a noose. That is not reasonable behaviour.
Michael, why stop at 5? Why doesn't he go for victim 6, victim 7, victim 8?
And I think that's a good question to ask. Sometimes offenders want to be caught in order to bring what they're doing to an end. Other times they want to continue. With talking to the police and engaging in them, there's an element that he wants to be caught, and one has to say, well, why? Yes, he goes into detail with each offender and can remember and wants it sort of recorded on record. This is what he's done. But it is always an interesting question. Why leave yourself open to a situation in which you can be caught? This wasn't a slip. So why did he go to the police? I don't think that is clear. And if we try to find a rationale for that, then we're just speculating.
He's proud. He is actually proud of what he's done. He thinks he's managed to achieve a level of dominance, a level of freedom of expression of what he wanted to do to these people in a way that very few other people have the nerve to follow through on. So he's proud. That's why we get all the details that we get in his confession.
Ireland died in prison. He was serving a full life tariff with no chance of parole. His bleak confessions continue to offer a fascinating resource for police officers and psychologists looking to understand how a serial killer with a mind barren of empathy thinks.